Viewer discretion is advised.
The longtime home of the Tigers, with its famous overhang, dirt path to the mound, and intimate dimensions, it would be not just the history of the ballpark that it is remembered for, but its longtime state of limbo after it was closed as well. Following the 1999 season, in which the Tigers moved into a nearby stadium, Tiger Stadium sat empty for nearly 9 years, a rotting eyesore befitting of the Detroit area at the time. Finally, in 2008, the park was demolished, where a youth facility has been partially installed. We live in a society where the Tigers spring training facility is pretty average. It's also located in Lakeland, which is inland Florida, and gets the lovely distinction of being kind of swampy and right in the middle of Orlando and Tampa. Though not an exact replica of Comerica Park, Joker Marchant Stadium features dimensions similar to that of the big club. It's only missing the right field well. The 50-year-old park recently completed renovations in 2017 and is named for former Lakeland Parks and Recreation Director Joker Marchant, not the Joker. Only ballpark to feature a pathway between the mound and the plate, a landing strip if you will. Detroit natives will get that reference. One thing I love about Comerica is the unique entranceways located at every corner of the park. One has 2 giant tigers, another 2 giant bats, one a Ferris wheel, and one dumps right into the Pepsi Pavilion. The ballpark upgraded this year's food selection. However, they didn't bother upgrading the team.
Detroit Tigers. The Tigers had a nice tenure under Jim Leland where they made some deep playoff runs, but of course, they could never close the deal and ended up with 0 rings like a bunch of losers. The current team is so bad, I don't even think AJ Hinch's famous cheating tactics will be enough to turn the club around. Miguel Cabrera might be a future Hall of Famer, but he's also a drunk driver, so fuck him. Pause. Detroit Tigers. Get it? Its name is Pause because tigers have paws and the team name is the Tigers. It's a funny name. Paws looks pretty friendly, but you know what they say, you can never fully trust a wild animal. Just look at what happened with Siegfried and Roy back in the day. Grade B+.
2012, Detroit Tigers took a funky path to the World Series. After a crummy start, they clawed their way back to the top of the AL Central, winning their 2nd consecutive division title. The Tigers narrowly defeated Oakland in the ALDS, then absolutely wrecked the Yankees in the ALCS to reach the World Series. So who got them there? Well, Mike Ilitch supplied the cash. The Little Caesars pizza magnate had owned the Tigers since the 90s. He bought them from the founder of Domino's, which I think is nice. And Ilitch threw around a lot of cash. Veteran executive Dave Dombrowski had the green light to spend that pizza money, with a win-now mindset fueling over $130 million in salary. Dombrowski had been Tigers GM since 2002. He's the guy who brought the legendary Jim Leland out of retirement to manage Detroit in 2006, a huge season that ended with World Series heartbreak. 6 years later, those guys made their Fall Classic return thanks to this well-compensated, well-balanced roster. A rotation of brilliant starting pitchers in their primes. All-star Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, who gritted through late-season injury, recent acquisitions Doug Fister and Anibal Sanchez. Young pitchers Rick Porcello and Drew Smyly held great promise as future starters. Detroit invested heavily in offense, too. Stalwart Miguel Cabrera wielded the biggest bat in baseball, winning 2012 AL MVP thanks to a historic Triple Crown season at the plate. By his side, newly signed slugger and fellow All-Star Prince Fielder. Austin Jackson was Detroit's prized prospect in the outfield. Delman Young's ALCS heroics helped make mincemeat of the Yankees. And this wasn't even Detroit at full strength. Veteran slugger Victor Martinez had missed the whole season because of injury. Young catcher Alex Avila played through his injuries but clearly wasn't himself. Even if the Tigers flopped in the 2012 World Series, they could look forward to bigger, better, healthier years ahead. Or so it seemed. The first thing definitely happened. The second thing, not so much. There's not a lot to say about that 2012 World Series. Detroit looked overmatched from the first inning of the first game when Justin Verlander promptly let the San Francisco Giants pull ahead. The Tigers' offense couldn't hang in Game 1 and disappeared in Games 2 and 3. Detroit became the first World Series participant in decades to lose consecutive shutouts. Detroit went down in a sweep, but their deep playoff run had been kinda surprising to begin with, so the vibes were fine. With better health, the Tigers looked well-positioned to contend again, and they did. Yes, Delman Young left in free agency, but Detroit's lineup held strong thanks to Victor Martinez's return from injury and the addition of free agent Torrey Hunter. And that mighty starting pitching remained intact. It's a hell of a thing when your ace, Verlander, has kind of an off year, so you just let the next guy step up and win Cy Young himself. That was Max Scherzer in 2013, although Anibal Sanchez and his sparkling ERA got votes too. The bats popped throughout the 2013 season as well. Cabrera won his second consecutive MVP award as centerpiece of one of the league's most productive, hardest-hitting offenses. The Tigers mostly looked the part of the favorite, but they had problems on the margins, those critical edges you need to advance in the postseason. The defense couldn't always make outs in big moments, even after the addition of shortstop Jose Iglesias. And the bullpen was the big one. Detroit won 93 games and another division title, survived another close series with the A's, then took an early ALCS lead after Sanchez dominated the Red Sox to win Game 1 in Boston. Scherzer kept it rolling in Game 2, helping Detroit enter the 8th inning with a 5-1 lead, another road win in hand. The Sox were doomed. But then, relief pitchers loaded the bases and David Ortiz cleaned them up with a game-tying grand slam that Torrey Hunter could not snag, try as he might. In the bottom of the 9th, Boston devoured Rick Porcello and stole Game 2 on a walk-off. After a split in Detroit, Games 5 and 6 brought Sanchez and Scherzer back to the mound, but a little shakier this time, and the offense failed to bolster them with clutch hitting. Scherzer had the Tigers leading 2-1 late in Game 6, but the Cy Young winner let a few Red Sox reach base in the 7th, setting the table for yet another crushing grand slam off reliever Jose Veras. Series over. So that's quite a successful season with quite a painful conclusion. And the hits kept coming. Mere days after the Tigers' elimination, Jim Leyland announced he was done managing, for good this time. Pretty sudden end to an excellent 8-year tenure, albeit a tenure that fell short of a title. To smooth out the roster for new manager Brad Ausmus, team president Dave Dombrowski made some big moves. Out went slugger Prince Fielder, traded to Texas in a scheme to deepen the lineup and improve the defense, with newcomer Ian Kinsler taking second base while Cabrera moved from third to first. Out, too, went righty starter Doug Fister in a deal that brought back a couple interesting prospects. The Tigers felt Drew Smyly was ready to assume Fister's spot in the rotation. With some veteran signings, Detroit hoped to make sure they didn't miss Fielder too much, improve the defense, and above all else, fix that damn bullpen. Plans don't always go the way you want. For one thing, Justin Verlander still wasn't himself after undergoing core muscle surgery in early 2014. More injuries held Detroit back from being the kind of fast, versatile, defensively snappy team Dombrowski envisioned. In late July, the Tigers kinda counter-pivoted from the Fister trade, dealing the young Smyly and Austin Jackson for star lefty David Price, another recent Cy Young winner for the rotation. But again, if you had to pick one thing that most haunted the Tigers and their fans, it was that bullpen. Even with big-name closer Joe Nathan aboard, even with Jabba Chamberlain and the midseason addition of Joakim Soria, relief pitching killed the Tigers. In an ALDS against the Orioles, the whole staff kind of struggled, with the bullpen really blowing it at the ends of Games 1 and 2. Baltimore swept Detroit, a pretty discouraging outcome. The Tigers wasted a great Cabrera series and a breakout clutch performance from newcomer JD Martinez. They wasted that big, pricey rotation. They didn't even get to start two of these guys in the playoffs. Take a look at this rotation, because I'm going to mention them again later. Actually, I'm going to mention them right now, too, because that rotation immediately began to crumble. The ace, Max Scherzer, walked away in free agency. Dombrowski sacrificed another starter, young Rick Porcello, for a hopeful lineup-improving return centered around Yoenis Cespedes. But the same old problems bedeviled the 2015 Tigers. Injuries, bullpen failures, staring down a midsummer slump, and a record that dipped below 500 after the All-Star break, the Tigers became sellers. Dombrowski thinned the payroll by punting some of the big-deal, expiring contract talents he'd acquired of late, Price, Soria, and the recently acquired Cespedes. In return, a gaggle of interesting prospects. But the most important expiring contract of all was that of Dombrowski himself. Days after all that dealing, the Tigers ditched the dealer, releasing their team president of 13 years, a period in which the Tigers failed to win it all, but got a hell of a lot closer than they had in the decade or two prior. Longtime assistant Al Avila, father of catcher Alex Avila, took over baseball ops, presiding over the rest of a 2015 season that concluded with a last-place finish and Detroit's first missed playoffs in 5 years. Avila's big addition before the 2016 season was Justin Upton. Other than that, the Tigers hoped to improve internally, better health, different relievers, and a reimagined farm system, crucial given all the recently arrived prospects. Avila hoped to emulate those franchises that instilled consistent culture and approach all the way up the pipeline. He called it the Tigers' way. I also have to mention that Avila let his own son leave in free agency. Alex Avila returned to the Tigers later, but still, damn. Anyway, Detroit did improve, just not enough. With somewhat restored health, the resurgence of Verlander, a bounce-back year at the plate for Cabrera, and promising performances from the new young pitchers, Michael Fulmer in particular, the Tigers almost climbed back into contention. But with some slippage elsewhere in the pitching staff, the Tigers could not hang with Cleveland in the division. On the last day of the season, Detroit had a chance to snag the wild card. They played Atlanta that day and got an absolute masterpiece outing from Verlander, but generated nary a run. Another season ended short of the playoffs thanks to that sad, wet fart of a finish. Avila responded by steering into the skid, committing to a full rebuild. Payroll stayed pretty high entering the next season, but the first name on the checks changed. Longtime owner Mike Ilitch died in February 2017 at the age of 87, leaving governorship of the Tigers to his son Chris, who ran things a bit differently. That 2017 season brought back more health issues, back problems for Cabrera, and a frightening heart condition that would push Victor Martinez away from the field. The bullpen remained dismal. Fans piled on the manager, Ausmus, as Detroit's record plummeted. The Tigers had been leaking for a couple years, and as the trade deadline approached, Avila pulled the plug. He traded JD Martinez for prospects. He traded his recently returned son, along with Justin Wilson, for prospects. He traded away Justin Upton, and you knew it was really real when right before the deadline, the Tigers traded away the foremost of the Justins, Justin Verlander himself. At the end of a league-worst 2017 season, the Tigers fired Ausmus and let Anibal Sanchez, the last fading piece of that once elite pitching staff, depart in free agency. Payroll slashed. World Series roster all but demolished. Only Miguel Cabrera remained from the late great Tigers. Miggy stuck around for the rest of the decade and into the next one, while the team kinda stagnated around him. Entering 2022, the 10th anniversary of their World Series visit, Al Avila still had the Tigers in some version of rebuild mode. Or not. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it, Tigers fans watched Cabrera chase records as he approached retirement, and they hunted for signs that any of the post-demolition future investments might turn around a losing record. All those trades and all that losing left Detroit with prospects. Some fizzling, some retaining promise. And on that note, I'd like to revisit the pitching staff from that 2014 Tigers team, the last one to reach the postseason. Each of these guys, Every single one, and we can actually throw Drew Smiley in there too, has since won a World Series with another team. Pretty wild. It's not just that the Tigers failed to recoup equivalent value when they dismissed all those future champions. It's that the new regime invested much, much less in the team than the prior one did. The Chris Ilitch-owned, Al Avila-run Tigers that hit rock bottom in 2019 had a 25-man payroll of under $73 million, 21st in the majors, less than half of what Mike Ilitch was paying the contending Tigers. Avila, by the way, received a contract extension during that worst season. By 2021, he'd further cut payroll by over $10 million, a significant decline even when compared to the average cheap-ass MLB franchise. Ilitch and company seemed pretty fine with that, willing to wait, happy to spend that cash on other stuff. The early 20s brought reason for hope, just no clear payoff yet from practicing the so-called Tigers way. Patience is a virtue. A penny saved is a penny earned. The people who invented those sayings probably weren't signing a lot of free agents. All of this makes one wish the Tigers could have snagged one precious ring back when they were spending money. Could have avoided just one of the playoff disasters that preceded this big, long collapse.